Hi pals, it's me, Artie, they and pronouns only, and this week's video is me talking about those 2 episodes in Golden Girls about ME / chronic fatigue syndrome. I have never watched the Golden Girls. Never. I've never seen a whole episode through. I've never seen a season. I didn't even know the characters' names until doing this research. And to be honest, watching these 2 episodes through tiny clips from certain other websites has made me want to watch the Golden Girls. However, I don't have a subscription to Disney Plus, so I have to decide how I'm going to watch it if I want to continue. So I wanted to focus on these 2 episodes because, you know, I like talking about disability in popular media. And I definitely don't see a lot of popular media covering anything chronic illness related. And I really don't think I can personally think of any other shows or films that cover ME in particular. So doing some of my research, I saw that actually the Golden Girls has quite a strong gay following, or did have a quite a strong gay following when it was running, and that the Golden Girls seems to actually cover quite a lot of queer topics as well, and the HIV and AIDS crisis in the 80s, etc. of America. That, yeah, it definitely twigged my interest. A friend of mine is the one that told me that there were a couple of episodes on ME, which is basically the reason why I looked into it and wanted to give it a watch and share my thoughts. So the episodes that I am talking about are in season 5, Sick and Tired part 1 and 2. So yeah, there's some things that I didn't know when I was first making my notes, like how Sophia is Dorothy's mum. I had no clue. I didn't know until it came up in the episode. But the episode starts with Blanche. Again, I've not really watched the show, so I don't even really know how to pronounce some people's names in my own accent. But Blanche shares with the other 2 about her new dream to become a romance novelist. Dorothy comes in and they ask her to join them, and then they notice something's up and ask her what's the matter. And she says, I don't know what to do. I just don't know. I'm too tired. I was in front of the class and I couldn't talk. I was too tired to talk. I had to excuse them early. I just cannot get rid of this flu and it keeps getting worse, not better. And then Rose says, it might not be the flu. And Blanche says that Dorothy should go back to the doctor. And Dorothy says, I did. He said I'm fine. And Blanche says, get a second opinion. I can't remember who said this, didn't write this down for some reason. Maybe Rose, maybe Sophia. She did. She went to this other doctor who said the same thing. And then Blanche goes, then you're fine. And one of the other women says, she is not fine. Look at her. And Blanche says, I didn't say she looked fine. I said she was fine. They then start discussing getting Dorothy to see a specialist. And I think as Blanche leaves or has left, Dorothy says, remind me when I feel better to kick the crap out of her. So what I'm already learning is that Blanche is quite an irritating, self-absorbed character to the others. I don't know. In this episode anyway. We then see Dorothy at a doctor's appointment where I think she's seeing her regular family doctor, GP, in hopes of finding out something different, seeing somebody new, etc. The doctor comes in with the wrong chart in his hand, doesn't even realise he's not speaking to the right person. And Dorothy says, all I can think about are my test results and how to keep this gown closed. And he said, you won't need it, your results are normal. And she says, I've been sick for 5 months now, sore throat, fever, muscle aches, muscles are weak, swollen glands, totally exhausted all the time. And he says, I know, you told me. And she's like, well, maybe it bears repeating. Maybe you still think I'm Lorraine Mislansky or whatever it is, the name on the other patient file that he had instead of hers. And then the doctor begins to blame it on Dorothy being lonely because she doesn't have a current partner, even though she seems to live in a house with her friends, basically, and her mum. And she responds with, I'm at a point now where I'm so exhausted that sometimes I cannot speak, literally cannot speak. There are days when I can't get out of bed. Raising my arms to wash my hair in the shower is too exhausting for me. I can't even do that. She then goes on to list some more symptoms that she experiences. Heart palpitations, I forget things, I can't concentrate, I get confused. And the doctor says, I don't believe you're sick, but you do. If you want to pursue it, that's fine with me. He's basically like, you can spend your money if you want to, but I don't think you need to or should. And then he gives her a recommendation of a specialist to go and see. And then Sophia stumbles into the doctor's office like, it's been 2.5 hours. I thought you died. Who are you? I'm the doctor. And she goes, we'll see about that. And whilst there are some not great traits for Sophia, she is really funny. A lot of this episode, or these 2 episodes, really show just reality of being chronically ill with something that people just don't really understand or even believe exists. And just the ways they throw in like really insignificant information to some people, but like so accurate information to what goes on in the real world, like the
it's been 2.5 hours, I thought you died,
waiting for a doctor's appointment and this is just her GP. And yeah, throughout these 2 episodes I really like the ways that Dorothy, her mum and her other friends talk back to the doctors, bitch about the doctors when they're not in the doctor's offices and stuff like that. It all just feels very like realistic to being a sick person and being friends or generally loved ones of a sick person, and just witnessing how ridiculous the treatment and care is at times. And as well, like I think it's a really good depiction of like this is a lot of people's experience actually. Yeah, I really like that. We'll see about that, about whether he's actually a doctor or not. And the doctor says that Dorothy is 100% tip-top, and she's like, well, Mr. Tip-top, why does my daughter feel like hell? So yeah, moments like that are really funny to me. Then we're in their little backyard as Rose is cooking food on the barbecue. Rose is going to be going with Dorothy to New York to see the specialist, and Blanche is upset about it because New York is glamorous, I guess. I don't know. Or like maybe the suggestion of what the relationships are like between them. And Dorothy says, when I feel bad, Rose makes me feel better. Rose knows I'm sick. And Blanche says, well, I know you're sick. You tell me that all the time. And like Blanche is a really good example of the person who's like, who just doesn't get it. Like, I think almost every sick person has had or has somebody in their life who is Blanche, who might have like good intentions when she speaks, but is very dismissive, actually. Then Rose says, it's going to be a great trip, you're going to be cured, and I'm going to go see the baked potato, and walks out. And everyone's just sort of like staring for a moment. And Dorothy says, I said she was comforting, I didn't say she was smart. Then we're in the specialist doctor's office in New York. He already starts with like a tone and an attitude. So what are you doing here? Nobody found anything wrong with you. You've had all these tests done and there's nothing wrong. He interrupts her constantly, which is something that pisses me off. You're asking me a question and you want me to answer, but you won't let me answer. He says, look, your problem is you're tired. I'm tired sometimes too. It's called getting old. And she's like, I'm sick. I had to give up my job because I'm too tired to do it. And he just goes, how did you get here? And she's like, I flew to my office in a taxi. How did you get up to my office? And she goes, how did I get to your office? And he says, it's not a hard question. And she goes, I walked. And he goes, you walked. You're not sick, Dorothy. The people I see can't walk, can't swallow, some can't breathe. Don't take this the wrong way, but have you thought of seeing a psych? And she says, I have seen 2 psychiatrists and here are letters from both of them. They both say there is nothing psychologically wrong with me. They believe it is physical. And he says, well, what the hell do they know? Psychiatry isn't a science. Then Dorothy says, then why did you suggest I see one? And he says, because what you have is not scientific. There is nothing wrong with you, Dorothy, except what happens to all of us. In case you haven't noticed, you're not 30. And I was like, me neither, mate. I'm not 30 yet, but I'm also sick, and you probably would have gaslit me too, babe. Probably would have gaslit me too, babe. And he goes, take a cruise, Dorothy. Go to a hypnotist. Change your hair colour. And he was like, my wife changed her hair colour and she's feels so much better, or what the fuck ever. So Dorothy returns back to the hotel room and Rose is in there, and Rose is like, what did he say? And Dorothy says, nothing. He said exactly what everyone else did. And Rose says, oh, I thought he would at least find out something. Then Dorothy sort of tries to change the conversation, asks Rose to tell her about her day, what she's been doing in New York, but then starts crying. And Rose says, what is it, Dorothy? What happened? And Dorothy says, maybe I am crazy. Nobody believes me. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. Maybe I am. Maybe I am really crazy. And Rose goes, you're not crazy. I mean, you are absolutely not crazy. I've seen you walk. I see how wiped out you get. You're not crazy, honey. You're sick. And Dorothy says, I think so too. I really do, but no one believes me. And Rose says, doctors don't know everything, Dorothy. And Dorothy says, you're right. And Rose says, I mean, they think they do, but they don't. And Dorothy says, you're right. So like, yeah, this is a great example of like, you know, Rose might not be the most intelligent or smart person in the room, but actually she kind of is. She gets it. She gets this. She gets what it is that Dorothy needs in this moment. And she knows how to validate Dorothy's feelings about this. Dorothy has repeatedly been told that she's just making it up. It's all in her head. There's nothing wrong with her. Sort of having someone outside of herself tell her, no, I can see you are not well. You are not okay. I can see it. Like, that is so helpful for a lot of people alone, but then also to be like, doctors don't know everything, babes. They think they do. They really think they do, but they don't. Then back home, Blanche is talking about her novel again to Rose. Then Dorothy's mum comes in and Rose asks, how is she? As in Dorothy. Sophia says, wiped out and depressed, even though she tries to hide it. Rose says, Sophia, she's going to be okay, I know it. Blanche says, Sophia, she's going to be okay, she's tough. And these are things that a lot of people with chronic illnesses will have heard a lot at some point. Glad that they're not saying it in front of her is all I've got to say. Then Rose says, there are all sorts of things people get that they can't diagnose. And then they disappear as mysteriously as they come. And then she starts talking about something completely off topic, to be honest, and about somebody who did end up dying. So that was a really unhelpful thing, but you know, part of the comedy of this show. Then it goes back to the topic and Sophia says, I think the worst thing in the world is if your child dies before you do. And Rose says, Sophia, Dorothy's not going to die. And Sophia says, I know that. Blanche then says, she's going to be fine. Sophia says, I know. Then there's a little bit more conversation about this, and then the impact of someone having an adult child becoming ill, and how that impacts them as a parent, as someone who loves them. And then Sophia goes on to say, well, I'm 80-something, and I've seen more death and dying than any of you. Over the past 5 months, we've watched a perfectly healthy, energetic woman waste away. She can't do anything anymore. What difference does it make that they don't have a name for it yet? It's still something. There were lots of diseases they didn't have a name for. You think they had a name for the Black Plague when just one guy had it? Thousands had to die before they knew what it was. Dorothy could be dying and we just don't know it, which is very true. It's very accurate. Just because doctors either don't know what it is, can't name it, or don't believe it's real, doesn't mean it's not real, and doesn't mean it's not having an impact on your life or your life expectancy. That not knowing aspect a lot of the time is worse than finally knowing what it is that's going on, because when you don't know, all you're trying to do is find out what it is and how to deal with it and manage it. That means you don't have access to a lot of care, medications, which could be important for whatever the condition is. With many chronic health issues, the initial symptoms are all very vague and they all overlap a lot, and they all kind of just look like the flu. They all kind of just look like a cold. They all kind of just look like you're burnt out. A lot of it is that exhaustion, not sleeping enough, or bad sleep, or sleeping too much, weight loss, weight gain, sometimes things to do with like what was mentioned earlier, the glands, or having a fever, night sweats, sore throats, you know, sometimes migraines, like the aches and pains, general malaise. That's usually the word for it, general malaise. And it's usually when it goes past that first stage is when most people are diagnosed, and that's when a lot of irreversible damage begins. And then it's episode 2. Dorothy is like beating the shit out of this Play-Doh in this doctor's office, and the doctor says, well, as far as doctors go, you've certainly seen the best. And Dorothy says, the best don't exist anymore, the best is dead. And she was like, well, I don't mean you, everyone except you, babe. I worked out later in this scene that they are friends. His name is Harry. I don't like I said, don't know the backstory, so I was sort of here like, why is she in like a pediatrician's office? And why is she talking to the doctor like that? She then says, so do you think I'm crazy too? And he says, Dorothy, I think you are very sane. Just because a doctor hasn't found something doesn't mean there isn't something there. Dorothy says, are you serious? And Harry nods. Then how come you know that and they don't? And he said, first of all, dear, I know you and you're a stable person. If you say you're sick, you're probably sick. He then writes down some details of a virologist. I don't know what it is, but like a contagious diseases expert. And he sort of brings up the fact that Lyme disease is quite a new condition at the time. I think this was also filmed in 1989, so a while ago, more than 30 years ago, like basically 35 years ago, which is another layer to all of this that makes this, like, makes these 2 episodes so wild to me, in like how just immaculate the presentation and representation is of chronic illness generally, but also specifically ME. It was written by the producer who has ME, which absolutely fucking unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. What the fuck do you mean 35 years ago someone with a chronic illness got to write a double episode on that chronic illness on a massive TV show in the 80s, nearly 90s? Where the fuck is that now? Where is that now? There is some, but you know, I would have hoped we would have had a bit more in 35 years. Dorothy then says, listen, Harry, thank you. I can't tell you what it means to have someone like you, believe me. Dorothy then comes home, or like walks in the room with the others and says, morning. Rose says, oh, you look terrific, where are you going? And Dorothy said, to that specialist that Harry recommended. And Sophia comes around saying, wipe off your makeup. And Dorothy's like, what? And so this is a really funny part as well that is very real. A lot of people I know do this. Sophia says, you look too healthy, maybe that's why they don't believe you. You don't look sick. And then Blanche comes in looking really awful, having not slept all night. And then Sophia goes, she could go, she looks terrible. I'm like, no, this is the thing that especially among women / femme presenting people / people perceived as women, that if you turn up to, it's a bit of a weird balance, turning up to a doctor's appointment with a full face of slap, you're fine, there's nothing wrong with you. Turning up with no makeup on, looking completely bedraggled, that's not, I don't think that's a word, and then they're like, you're putting this on, this is pretend, or they then just go straight to mental illness instead. But yeah, I liked that mention. Then there's like this whole section about Blanche and her writing, and everyone's just sort of like rolling their eyes because Blanche keeps moaning about being so tired, too tired to sleep, and everyone's like just like, oh god, shut up. I wasn't sure if they were like concerned about how Dorothy was feeling about the things she was saying or not. Wasn't that clear to me. But you know, she kept saying a lot of things that's like, yeah, and that's how I feel all the time, and all you do is keep brushing me off, you know. That's how I read that situation. And yeah, she said things like, I may die from this, what am I going to do? my body is limp with exhaustion. And it's like, you're just being overdramatic from one night of no sleep, babe. Sleep does not help Dorothy. Then Sophia says, like, we gotta go. I hate to leave. We ain't never seen a show like this before. Blanche being ridiculous. And then Rose says, good luck, Dorothy. I hope you find something wrong with you. Oh, I don't mean something wrong with you. And it's like that whole thing of like, you know, I hope they find something so that, you know, we can move forward. But also, I don't want something to be really wrong with you. You know? And it was that funny little rollback of like, oh wait, actually, didn't mean that how that came out, is like a very not sick person response. Because I think most of my friends would be like, hope they find something wrong with you, babe. And that's it. There's no rollback of, oh, I don't mean it like that. Yes, we do. We do mean it. The next scene is at the new doctor's office. Sophia is trying to be complimentary, but is actually just being very racist. This was probably the most uncomfortable scene for me to watch. It was a lot. Dr. Chang says, I am finished reading her file. You have seen some wonderful doctors, but I really can't agree with their findings. There are new diseases all the time, things that we don't necessarily have tests for, but that doesn't mean the diseases don't exist. Sophia says some more terrible racist stuff, trying to be complimentary. And then Dr. Chang says, I think you are sick. I think you have something called chronic fatigue syndrome. It's fairly recent. There are many theories about it, but most of us believe it's a virus that just hasn't been identified yet, which is a grand oversimplification of that, but okay. Kind of. Dorothy says, doctors just keep telling me that I was depressed. Dr. Chang says, well, depression can make a person feel tired, but depression doesn't start suddenly, doesn't give you swollen glands, sore throat, and all the other symptoms you were talking about. Now, there are certain blood tests which we will do, and if those results are abnormal, that combined with the exclusion of other diseases will compose a profile that actually thousands of people fit. Dorothy says, so I really have something real. And he says, I would say you most certainly do, but we should have our answers in a couple of weeks. Dorothy says, how long will it last? I mean, will it go away? Does it get worse? Can people die from it? And the doctor says, well, no one has died from it. Nowadays, not entirely correct. We don't know how long it lasts. Some people recover in months, some people have it in 10 years, but that happens in other diseases as well. If you take MS, for example, some people have a 20-year remission, other people end up in wheelchairs. There are variations, which is a point that I really like. That's something that I think really needs to be hammered home more often, all the time, about all conditions. There are always variations in all conditions. Like even something as simple as breaking a bone. There are variations in that based on what bone you broke, how you broke it, and who you are as a person, and the rest of your health. So I liked that point was included to as a reminder that not everyone looks the same with the same condition. You'd think it's obvious, but it's kind of just not. Everyone's like, well, you don't fit in this one really specific profile of this one disease that I don't even really understand myself anyway, so you can't possibly have it. As an autistic, I really, really feel that one quite a lot. Sophia then continues saying complimentary things, but racistly. Then Dr. Chang says, all I can say at this point is try to adapt to it. Rest when you need to, eat well, eliminate stress if you can. Right now there is no cure and no one thing that relieves symptoms with everyone. You'll just have to live with it. So that final sentence is a little bit brutal, but with the rest of it, I feel like it's okay. It's sort of you just gotta learn how to live with it in your own way. Dorothy then says, oh, why didn't they tell me? All those doctors I saw. And the doctor says, I'm sure some of them weren't familiar with it, and those who have heard about it have trouble believing it exists, since they are not able to see it under the microscopes just yet. Those colleagues of mine, unfortunately, tend to blame the victim. Which was that wording was just so impeccable. I've never heard wording like that before. Of these colleagues, unfortunately, blame the victim. I've never heard of chronically ill patients called victims in this way. Those kinds of sentences I've seen and heard before are usually like, oh, they always blame the patient. They always say it's the patient's fault. But like specifically positioning patients as victims in this circumstance, love it. Dorothy then says, I can't tell you what a relief this is. And then Dr. Chang says, I'm sure. Are there any other questions I can answer for you? And Dorothy says, not now, not that I can think of, maybe later. Right now, I can't even think straight. And then he orders the blood tests and they go home. Then they are all out for dinner, basically to celebrate, which is such a me thing. Celebrating being diagnosed. Hell yeah. Dorothy orders the best champagne. And she's like, this is all on me. It's a celebration. And the waiter's like, oh, what are we celebrating? And Sophia's like, my daughter found out she has a Sophia's like, my daughter found out she has a debilitating disease. Long pause. And the waiter goes, oh. And Dorothy says, and it has a name. I'm thrilled. Blanche says, we all are. And the waiter says, well, of course, congratulations, champagne it is. Dorothy says, I can't tell you what relief it is to just be sick, not sick and crazy, and to know what I have, and there are a lot of other people who have the same thing. And Blanche says, I don't like the name. It ought to have a better name. Dorothy then says, that's what Dr. Chang said. Chronic fatigue syndrome makes it sound like I am just a tired person when it's so much more than that. And then they start joking about other names to give it. And again, that's another thing I really like. That's something that a lot of me and my friends talk about too. That's why we call it Emmy. I can't pronounce the full name, but that's why we don't call it CFS or chronic fatigue syndrome, because it's so much more than just being tired or just being fatigued or exhausted. There are so many other levels to it, and so many other like biological functions related with it as well. Like, if anything, I use the term chronic fatigue as a symptom rather than as the name of a condition. Chronic fatigue can come with all sorts of other conditions as well. So yeah, that's just another thing that I like that they included. Then Dorothy spots the fucking asshole specialist that we saw earlier in the episode and says, oh my god, it's him, I can't believe it. And Blanche like thinks it's a hot man. She's like, who is he? I saw him first, where is he? He's just at a dinner table with some woman. I don't think she's ever identified either. Dorothy says, it's Dr. Budd, the neurologist I saw in New York, the one who told me I was just getting old and to go see a psychiatrist. She gets up and goes over to him and says, Dr. Budd, and he's like, yes? Seems to have no fucking idea who she is. Dorothy says, you probably don't remember me, but you told me I wasn't sick. Do you remember you told me I was just getting old? And he's like, I'm sorry, I really don't. And Dorothy says, remember, or maybe you're getting old. That's a little joke. Well, I tell you, Dr. Budd, I really am sick. I have chronic fatigue syndrome. That is a real illness. You can check with the Center of Disease Control. Doctor says, well, I'm sorry about that. Not sorry that he missed the diagnosis. Sorry that she's been diagnosed with it. Dorothy says, well, I'm glad. At least I know I have something. And he says, I'm sure. Well, nice to see you. And Dorothy says, not so fast. There are some things I have to say. There are a lot of things I have to say. Words can't express what I have to say. And she starts getting quite upset and welled up. She's like, what I went through, what you put me through, I can't do this in a restaurant. He's like, good. And she's like, but I will. Me. Any ounce of some fucker thinking they're going to get off the hook. Oh no, I'm coming back. I'm back again. Fueled me up. I have all the energy in the world to tell you what an asshole you are. I'm fueled by petty bitterness, you motherfucker. And then the lady this doctor's having dinner with is like, who is this person? And he's like, oh, look, miss. And Dorothy's like, sit. I sat for you long enough. And then she grabs a chair to sit down at the table, which I thought was very funny, but also immaculate for Chronic fatigue syndrome. I can't stand to have a go at you. I'm gonna sit down. Thank you. She says, Dr. Budd, I came to you sick and scared, and you dismissed me. You didn't have the answer, and instead of saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, you made me feel crazy, like I made it all up. You dismissed me. You made me feel like a child, a fool, a neurotic who was wasting your precious time. Is that your caring profession? Is that healing? No one deserves that kind of treatment, Dr. Budd. No one. I suspect if I were a man, I'd have been taken a bit more seriously and not told to go to a hairdresser. And the doctor says, look, I'm not just going to sit here anymore. And his guest says, shut up, Lewis. And then Dorothy continues, I don't know where you doctors lose your humanity, but you lose it. You know, if all of you at the beginning of your careers could get very sick and very scared for a while, you'd probably learn more from that than from anything else. You better start listening to your patients. They need to be heard. They need caring. They need compassion. They need attending to. You know, someday, Dr. Budd, you're gonna be on the other side of the table. And as angry as I am, and as angry as I always will be, I still wish you were a better doctor than you were to me. Then there's the applause as she gets up and goes back to her own table. And Rose is like, are you all right? And Dorothy says, I feel better than I felt in a long time. She picks up the glass and toast to my friends who made being sick a little easier because they cared. Then they realise how much the champagne costs and that they can't afford it. So Sophia throws some salt in her glass, spits it everywhere, complains. The waiter tastes it and is like, oh my god, that's disgusting. Don't worry, we will cover your entire meal. I just thought that was a fucking hilarious way to end the episode. Conclusion. Generally, I am really not sure I could give you a better example of chronic illness being portrayed in media. I was so shocked by this on like every level. The fact that this was in 1989, the fact that the writer had ME, how accurate to the experience of being chronically ill is, the fact that it was a main character as well, a main character plotline centered in all this. I know there's like another season and a half or whatever, maybe even more than that. Yeah, maybe like 2.5 seasons after these episodes. I don't know if she continues to have ME or if that just sort of disappears, or if that's kind of continued through the rest of the show. So that's something I'll be really interested to know. If you've watched Golden Girls, let me know. Does that ever come back? Usually in sitcoms, that sort of thing doesn't. The way it has been handled and the way that the character with ME was portrayed and written was impeccable to me. She was both, you know, that mixture of tired, vulnerability, ready to give up, and like really doubting herself at times, all the way back round to, nah bitch, fuck off, there's something wrong with me, so I'm gonna make somebody listen. And then giving that doctor a piece of her mind, which is something not many people get a chance to do. I did once. I don't remember if I actually shared that particular story on here before, but from my doctor didn't believe me video before I was diagnosed with a rare disease called Takayasu's, where I don't have a pulse in my right arm, I did get to give that doctor who didn't believe me a piece of my mind. It was quite nice. I think that because that doesn't happen very often, that was quite cathartic for probably a lot of people, I'm sure, or will be if anyone watches it at another time. And it's all the things that you want to say to those doctors who are so fucking horrible to you. And yeah, I really liked that it was actually really destigmatizing as well. It humanized the condition and the people with the condition. It came from the point of view of like, you know, I want to know what the fuck is going on. I want to know what is happening to me and my body so that I can understand it and cope with it, rather than, oh, woe is me, I'm so ill, this diagnosis is the worst thing in my life. As well as that issue of like doctor shopping and trying to get second opinions off of people who just didn't fucking believe you, trying to find one doctor who believes you enough to support you in finding the right route to diagnosis, to treatment and stuff like that. But also I did really like the inclusion of her loved ones and how they feel about it. Chronic illness feels very lonely, but it doesn't just impact the person with the chronic illness, it also impacts the people who love that person. Seeing someone you love struggling, not necessarily suffering, depends, but suffering as well at times, being really ill, being in pain, not being able to do the things that they love or see the people that they love because of something that they can't do anything about. And then, yeah, that fear of not knowing what it is that your loved one has if you're at that stage and what that could mean for their life. When you're in that limbo, like they addressed, you don't know. She might have been terminal, she might have had a terminal condition that could have had treatment. But without finding a doctor who would take 5 minutes to just listen to what she was saying, look into it more, it was that kind of fear of like, you never know what you never know what's going to happen. And I know that's like a general thing for life anyway, but it's kind of like a more obvious impending thought with chronic health issues, particularly either when you're not yet diagnosed or when you're diagnosed with something rare or a few things that are complex. There is always that sort of awareness that it could get worse. And you don't know when, you don't know why, you don't know how that might happen, and you don't know if you will recover or if you will reach your baseline again. You don't know if there is anything that can be done to help you feel better. And a lot of the chronic illnesses that I talk about as well here tend to have such an impact on your ability to just do anything, let alone live whatever time you have left to the fullest, if that would be the case for people who maybe don't have long. Yeah, I think generally my main criticisms are why was Sophia so accidentally racist all the time? I know it's probably realistic, but oh my god, it's not the point, is it? Can we move on? And probably just the fact that the actress probably doesn't have a chronic illness. I say probably, I didn't look into it, so it's just my assumption. Nothing came up about the actress herself when I was doing my Googling for just learning a bit more about this. But, you know, in a long-standing series, long-standing show, I'll give it a pass because the writer has ME, and clearly they all did a really good job, in my personal opinion, of portraying this well. And yeah, of course, generally with shows from the 80s, not very diverse, so it's just a bunch of white cishet women, able-bodied, all slim, you know. But the representation itself of ME, I think, was done really, really well. So yeah, that as well, I feel like these episodes have convinced me that I would like to watch the rest of the Golden Girls series. I think it's something that I would enjoy watching. Camp, being old, because I feel like when you're chronically ill, there's a lot of overlap with being old. So a lot of what they probably will be talking about or complaining about, I'd just be like, yeah, mood Rose, yes, Dorothy, you tell them. So yeah, I don't know if I have much else to say on it really. Obviously we have progressed somewhat in the last 35 years with more knowledge on ME. There's a few different like tick box sheets basically about symptoms to help diagnosing it. There's obviously a few different kinds of studies that are ongoing. I can't remember the biggest one in the UK, can't remember what it's called, but I'll put details in the description if I can remember any of them that are looking into genetics to do with it. My general understanding is that majority of the time it is started, triggered, caused by one or repeated viral infections. I think that's my general understanding for a lot of autoimmune conditions as well. It's just that they may lie dormant in your genetics for a long time, stop being dormant when something triggers it, which could possibly be emotional trauma, physical trauma, or yeah, viral sicknesses a lot of the times. That's something that's kind of discussed in Crohn's as well with the MAP vaccine, that basically everybody comes into contact with MAP germs. I can't remember what the right term is, but like this particular kind of germ, bacteria, whatever it is, everyone comes into contact with that, but only some people develop Crohn's. And it's kind of thought that the reason for that is that there's just some genetic predisposition, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean like it's hereditary. I don't have anyone else in my family with Crohn's specifically. Basically, it can just be the way that your DNA has rolled and jumbled and landed between two parents. And yeah, like I said, obviously more people call it ME rather than CFS. One of my online friends makes videos of his experience with ME/CFS, as he is a somewhat recently diagnosed person. It's been a couple of years at least, I can't remember exactly, but yeah, I'll also link Finn's YouTube channel below as well if you would like to see more of like personal experience of someone with ME. You can be any age and develop ME. You can be any gender and develop ME. There's definitely a few men I follow, like cisgender men I follow on maybe Instagram, definitely Twitter. Finn is a trans man. It's mainly diagnosed in women, but cis women. But yeah, like any gender can get it. Yeah, I think that was also like an interesting factor of like an older woman getting ME, because yeah, I'm sure that older women are probably just told, you're just getting old. And yeah, it kind of goes along with a lot of my own experiences that when I used to catch everything and it wouldn't go for fucking months. I remember, I think the last thing I caught before I was really diagnosed with anything was, I think I got laryngitis, and I still had it like 3-5 months later. Like, it didn't go away for a really long time. And then yeah, a lot of my own symptoms sometimes replicate flu-like symptoms. My throat is always a bit weird. I mean, you hear me in my videos sometimes that I'm suddenly like Kermit the fucking Frog. My sinuses are always fucking weird, some days worse than others. I highly recommend these 2 episodes as like a really good starting point for sharing information either with newly diagnosed chronically ill people, not even just ME, but also to share with loved ones. It's like a very digestible couple of episodes. They're not very long either. I think they were maybe about half hour each. You know, it's not in over the top complicated medical language, and like I said, it includes that aspect of how it also impacts the people around Dorothy, which I think would be helpful for people who care about someone with a chronic illness. So yeah, I generally would recommend this to anyone who wants an easier way to sort of explain what the fuck is going on and what experiences they have had or chronically ill people have generally, and kind of make a conversation about this stuff a little bit easier. And yeah, that's generally it for this video. But yeah, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment if you haven't already. Share my videos if you think other people would enjoy them or benefit from them. Commenting, sharing really helps with algorithmic things. And yeah, I'm still working towards that 1,000 subscribers, so sharing it around will help. But yeah, that's it for this week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.